I think you had me at NDE. So why don't you take me back to who you were before you had your NDE? Because
Hmm.
you were like in biotech, working in cancer diagnostics, all that sort of stuff, and that's a pretty scientific lens to view the world. So I'm interested in what happened and how things changed for you after that.
Yeah, long story kind of short. I was working in biotech at the time, like you mentioned. I was meditating. So I've been meditating since I was about 12. I'd had a Kundalini awakening in about 2015. And then in 2020, you can guess what was going on. And I remember I was on the phone with a director of a medical institution in the Bay Area, and we were trying to figure out pandemic response and how to best navigate that. And we really didn't know much. And then I could feel myself getting sick. And as the virus progressed, I started having cardiovascular problems, neurological problems, heart rate problems. But ultimately, I knew enough, luckily with my biotech background, that I knew what cytokine storms were. And that's what ultimately ends up killing people with COVID. And there was one night where my lungs started to get really hot. So it gets really hot, like my chest is on fire, and then cold, and then stiff. And it was this hot, cool, stiff cycle, which is like a storm that was setting into my lungs. And I knew I was in trouble at that point. And so we went to the hospital. I was put into a quarantine unit, which was terrifying because I had to say goodbye to my husband. I didn't know whether I was going to see him again. There was that possibility. I was wheelchaired in because I couldn't walk at that point. And it was, and to this day, as you can imagine, still the most intense, terrifying experience. And I remember sitting in the hospital, and they're trying to figure out what to do, to stop the acceleration. And I was given a choice of a drug, whether to take it or not, but they didn't know whether it was going to make me worse or potentially help me. And ultimately, I had to make the decision as the patient, which is kind of crazy, right? Because they just didn't know. It was so early. We knew very little. And so I said, let's go ahead and do it. And I was entering this, I call it the liminal space. So, and kind of like in between realms, in and out of my body, and seemingly in and out of time. And the reason I say that is because even before this event had happened, I had premonitions. So in my meditations, I saw something coming. I saw a big wave coming through. And I could feel it. And I don't know how else to explain this other than I knew that it was karmic, that this was a point in my life that was more or less destined. And the other interesting thing that I just think is material here is that I was seeing this other lifetime of mine, which I believe are all happening simultaneously. In this other lifetime, he was a man, medieval times, there was a war or a battle of some sort, and also a pandemic at the same time. And he had gone off to fight the war. I was seeing all of this, which is very trippy. And when he had come back, his whole family had died from the virus, from the pandemic. And so I saw his whole lifetime, which I knew was also mine. And he was devastated. He was bitter. He turned into a recluse. And so I was going in and out of this lifetime throughout the few weeks that I was seriously ill. And I will come back to how that concluded, because there is an ending to what I saw that lifetime shift into. But the events itself, the kind of biggest experience I had, I did not go into the light. I was kind of like outside of my body, perceiving what was going on around me from outside. And my body was starting to be so difficult to be in so much pain and fear as well, that I had this moment where I call it surrender rather than give up, because I didn't really give up. I surrendered on a level that I had never experienced before. And this was around the time that I felt death in my space. And the way I like to describe death is it's like an old friend showing up at your door that you didn't expect, because there's this weird familiarity. Like I knew it when I met it. I was very aware that this was an exit point and that death was near. And I was wanting to stay. I knew that I wanted to stay. I later better understood as I recovered, which took me about a year, why I wanted to stay, but this event happened all simultaneously. So there was a deep surrender. I like fell back into life is the best way that I can describe it as. And I also felt something from within me expand and almost like ask for help. But better than saying ask for help, it was almost like I was finally open to receiving help, because that resistance that I was fighting in my mind, trying to analyze things, trying to figure it out, trying to get the right drug, I just let all of that go. And that space allowed something to meet me. Now, I don't call it God, but I will call it a highly intelligent, extremely loving presence. And for me personally, it felt like I've had a relationship in meditations with ascended masters like Yogananda. It felt a bit like his energy. It felt similar to that. And when this being was in my space, both outside of my body and there was an echo into my body, if that makes sense, there was an event that happened, a healing. My first energy center, which is called the root chakra, Muladhara, then the space in between my eyes, and then my heart center. It was like bing, bing, bing. And I was back in my body and could still feel the presence in the room. And I just sat there in receiving and in awe. And there was something in that exchange that I knew I was going to be okay. I knew I was going to recover, even though that would take a very long time. But that was the kind of big experience for me. And then I'll share one more part to this, which is time travel related. But when I'd gotten home from the hospital and I finally was able to walk a few steps and I was able to get out to our fire escape, and I sat down on the fire escape, I looked up at the blue sky. It looked like this otherworldly blue, it just looked different. And I had this profound moment of presence, of peace, that was very hard to explain. And I thought about it in the years following because it was so etched in my mind. And fast forward to meditation about a year ago, 3 hours into that meditation, my heart opened, this wave came through, and I was standing on that fire escape looking at my past self. And that's what I was feeling in the past was my future. And how far I'd come, how much I'd healed, how much I had changed, how fulfilled I was, how peaceful I was.